So now you're spending $100 eating in downtown San Francisco just because you needed to go pee. 大家好，我是 Shang Guan Jie Wen, your friendly neighborhood Waiguaren. I want to talk to you today about public space and private space. Now, if you look around, you'll see this very large square. In America, a square like this belongs to the mall. We're currently at Wukesong, and a very large square like this, if this was in the United States, it would belong to the mall, to the Wukesong facilities, and no one would be able to use it without the permission of the mall owner. But here in China, things work differently. Maybe because of government policy, I'm not sure. But as a foreigner here in China, I noticed that later on this evening, this will be full of mostly older ladies dancing. They don't need a permit, they don't need permission from the mall, they can just use this public space. And malls across the entire city of Beijing, the public spaces in front of them, the private spaces that are privately owned, will be full of hundreds of thousands of ladies dancing and old men practicing martial art. If you look behind me, there has been a man playing guitar. He's not playing this moment, but he's using this public space. He just brings his own speaker system, he sets up his guitar and plays, and this is the same throughout the city. People have access to the public spaces in a way in China that they don't have back where I'm from. I'm not saying that either way is necessarily better, but it's completely different, and that's something that's new for me living here in China. There's also a considerable difference in the use of private spaces like restaurants. So in America, if you go into a restaurant, you're expected to spend quite a lot of money in order to sit there. And as soon as you're finished consuming whatever it is you've consumed, you're generally expected to leave. Sometimes a cafe will let you stay for up to an hour, but they'll say that you need to order over a certain minimum each hour in order to stay in that restaurant. This doesn't seem to be the case in China. 谢谢你. Instead, people will oftentimes go into a McDonald's, for example, here in China, or a KFC, and they will stay for 2 or 3 hours. Maybe they won't order anything at all. Sometimes they'll bring food from another place into the restaurant that they're going to consume it in and stay there anyways. 谢谢你. Thank you, sir. So I've actually also seen, and I'm not going to say where in Beijing, people sleeping in KFC in the middle of the night. Now, if you did that in America, they will kick you out. They will say, oh, you need to order something. Oh, you're not ordering something. Please leave now. I mean, I'm not saying that either way is necessarily better, but it does seem that people have a lot more access to private space here in China. And that's something that I noticed is different as a foreigner. During my time in San Francisco, another thing I noticed was about public restrooms. There aren't any. If you want to find a restroom in downtown San Francisco, the only way for you to go pee is to go and pay to be in a restaurant. Now, having said what I said before about the costs of restaurants, you have to keep in mind that restaurants are expensive and they expect you to buy something. So now you have to go to the restroom. You need to go into a restaurant and pay to be in that restaurant, and then you can use their restroom. So now you're spending $100 or whatever to eat in downtown San Francisco just because you needed to go pee. So here in Beijing, there are all kinds of restrooms on the street side where you can go to the restroom. Every mall has multiple restrooms on multiple floors. They're everywhere in public. You don't need to worry about that. There's much more accessibility, and that's another big difference about space. My producer just said that's not true after we cut the last segment, so I want to tell you a story. There have been so many times when I've been in downtown San Francisco and walking around for an hour looking for a toilet, and then you go into a cafe or a small restaurant, anywhere, a bistro, and you say, hey, can I use your restroom? And the first thing they'll say is, you need to buy something. This is a true story. Now, yes, some malls do have publicly accessible restrooms because they want you to stay in the mall and buy things. However, outside of that, good luck finding a toilet. So far, we've been talking about private space, spaces that are owned by somebody. Ostensibly, or on the face, public spaces are things like public parks, which belong to the city. So if you have a city park, it should belong to everybody. So let's say you want to have a photo shoot, or you want to have a small wedding, or you want to have some kinds of parties. You can't actually do that in most public parks in America without a permit. So a month in advance, you need to go to the city council, you need to apply for permits, you need to get permission, you may need to pay some fees to use the public park for a photo shoot or for a wedding. Whereas here, people just do whatever they want. It's their park. This is the public park. They go to the public park just like they go to the private space, and they use it as they see fit. And that is something that's different about the two cultures. All right, so another thing about is public art. Now, It might surprise people, even people who have lived in Beijing a long time, that graffiti is actually acceptable in some places. You go to Chijiuba, it's highly encouraged that artists put their marks on things, and they'll just cover it up another time. I've had police roll up on my friends and say, "Oh, what are you doing? You're spray painting this? Just don't spray paint anything bad," and then they leave. Whereas in America, if you spray paint something, you're generally going to be in trouble, so you try to do it, or people try to do it when no one's looking, or when there are no cameras, or late at night, things like that. So that's another difference about public space. Another thing is about decibel levels, or the sound ordinances in the city. In Beijing, at various times throughout the day and night, you'll hear people doing construction work. Now, yes, people do call their local security, the Baoan, to come and complain about noise levels. But in the United States, if you're playing drums in the wrong neighborhood, the city officials will come, police will come, and they will say, "Hey, you need to stop playing drums immediately." Or they'll give you a ticket. They'll force you to go to a time in court and pay a $125 fine because you were playing violin or something in your own house. Whereas if you're going to play cello in Beijing in the middle of the day, good luck to your neighbors. They're just going to have to hopefully enjoy cello. Another thing that is common, that is the same, is under the ground. Like in a subway, for example. In Beijing, you're going to see people under the ground selling things, playing violin, playing guitar, trying to make some money. You're going to see the same thing in New York City, or Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, especially in San Francisco. You go down subterranean levels, the police don't really care. They look the other way. People are going to do dance routines for money. People are going to sell books on the sidewalk for money. You see the same thing in Beijing, and this is the commonality between the two cultures. For some reason, public transit space surrounding subways seems to facilitate, "Oh, it's okay, go ahead and play some music there." In summation, space is treated very differently. There are advantages to both. For example, if there are a bunch of women dancing in a square, that makes it difficult to get across that square. So a lot of foreigners I've talked to complain about that. But there's also the fact that the accessibility of those allows those thousands and thousands of people all over the city to dance and enjoy themselves without having to pay a premium to buy the space all the time, which is a problem in the United States and not so much of a problem here. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Roosh, 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 roosh.